My name is Sophia. The day I married my husband, everyone told me I was the luckiest woman alive. For years I believed them. Then one day, I looked at the man sleeping beside me and whispered to myself, I married the wrong man. I didn't say it once. I said it every single day. I thought he had stopped loving me. I thought he was hiding another life. I thought our marriage was built on lies. But I was wrong. The truth was waiting for me in a place I never thought to look. And when I finally found it, I wished I could take back every word I had ever said about my husband. I met my husband, Michael, when I was 23 years old. At that time, I was working in a small bookstore in the center of town. My life was simple and peaceful. Every morning I opened the shop, arranged the books on the shelves, and greeted customers with a smile. I never imagined that an ordinary Friday afternoon would completely change my future. That afternoon, a tall man walked into the bookstore looking for a novel. He looked around for a few minutes before asking me for help. His name was Michael. He was kind, polite, and had the warmest smile I had ever seen. I helped him find the book he wanted, and before leaving, he thanked me with a smile that stayed in my mind for the rest of the day. A week later, Michael came back. Then he came again the following week. Soon I realized he wasn't only coming for books. One evening, just before the store closed, he smiled and asked if I would like to have coffee with him. I felt nervous because I had never agreed to meet a customer before, but something about him made me feel comfortable. I said yes. That evening became one of the happiest days of my life. We sat in a small cafe for hours talking about everything we could think of. We shared stories about our childhoods, our families, our dreams, and the future we hoped to build. We laughed until the cafe was almost empty, and when I walked home that night, I couldn't stop smiling. From that day on, we spent almost every weekend together. We walked through the park, watched old movies, tried new restaurants, and talked for hours about our dreams. Michael wasn't a wealthy man, but he had a kind heart. He always treated me with respect, listened when I spoke, and made me feel safe. I never cared about money because, with him, I already felt rich. A year later, Michael asked me to marry him. He didn't choose an expensive restaurant or plan a grand surprise. Instead, he took me to the little lake where we had spent one of our first afternoons together. As the sun slowly disappeared behind the trees, he held my hands, looked into my eyes, and said, Sophia, I can't promise you a perfect life, but I promise to love you, respect you, and stand beside you every single day. Before he could finish, tears filled my eyes. I smiled and whispered, yes. Our wedding was small but beautiful. Only our closest family and friends were there. We didn't have expensive decorations or a luxurious reception, but we didn't need any of that. We had love, and at that moment it felt like more than enough. Before the ceremony began, my father hugged Michael and quietly said, Take good care of my daughter. Michael looked at him without hesitation and replied, I promise. The first years of our marriage were everything I had ever dreamed of. We bought a small house with a white fence, planted flowers in the front yard, and spent every evening cooking dinner together. On weekends, we watched movies under a warm blanket or sat on the porch watching the sunset. Life wasn't perfect, but it was peaceful, and every night before falling asleep, I thanked God for bringing Michael into my life. When our daughter Lily was born, I saw tears running down Michael's face as he held her in his arms for the very first time. In that moment, I looked at my little family and truly believed I had married the best man in the world. I never imagined that years later, I would look at that same man and quietly tell myself, I married the wrong man. The first few years of our marriage were filled with happiness. Michael was the kind of husband every woman dreamed of having. No matter how tired he was after work, he always came home with a smile. We ate dinner together every evening, talked about our day, and laughed over the smallest things. On weekends we visited my parents, took Lily to the park, or simply stayed home watching old movies. Those simple moments became the happiest memories of my life. I truly believed nothing could ever come between us. Everything began to change when Michael accepted a new job at a large company. The salary was much higher, and we both thought it would give our family a better future. We dreamed about paying off our mortgage, taking Lily on her first vacation, and finally saving enough money to buy the little beach house we always talked about. I was proud of him, and I encouraged him to accept the offer without hesitation. At first, everything seemed normal. Michael still smiled when he came home, and we still found time for each other. But after a few months, his work became more demanding. He started leaving the house before sunrise and coming home long after dinner. Some nights, Lily had already fallen asleep before he even walked through the front door. I told myself it was only temporary. I believed things would soon return to the way they had always been. But they never did. Weeks turned into months, and months slowly became years. Michael was always busy. Even when he was sitting beside me, his phone kept ringing with work calls. During dinner, he answered emails. On weekends, he disappeared into his office with his laptop for hours. Sometimes I looked at him from across the room and wondered if he even noticed I was there anymore. The man who once listened to every word I said had become quiet and distant, as if his mind was somewhere else. Then I started noticing little things that I couldn't explain. He began protecting his phone, never leaving it on the table like he used to. Whenever it rang, he stepped outside before answering. Sometimes he smiled while reading messages and quickly locked the screen when I walked into the room. One evening, I asked who kept calling him so late. He looked at me for a moment before quietly saying, "It's just work." I wanted to believe him. I really did. But something inside my heart began to change. One rainy evening, Michael came home almost 3 hours later than usual. His shirt smelled like expensive perfume, a scent I had never worn. When I asked where he had been, he avoided my eyes and simply said there had been another meeting. That night, while he slept peacefully beside me, I stared at the ceiling for hours. For the first time since the day we got married, I wondered if my husband was hiding another life. And for the first time, I whispered the words I never thought I would say. I think I married the wrong man. After that night, I couldn't stop thinking about everything that had changed. Michael still came home late, still kept his phone close to him, and still found an excuse every time I asked him where he had been. The distance between us grew larger every day. We still lived in the same house, but it no longer felt like a home. We spoke only when we had to. Sometimes we sat at the same dinner table without saying a single word. The silence hurt more than any argument ever could. I started paying attention to every little detail. If Michael smiled while reading a message, I wondered who had sent it. If he left the room to answer a phone call, I imagined the worst. My mind became filled with questions that I could never answer. Instead of asking him calmly, I kept my fears to myself. Little by little, those fears turned into anger. One Saturday morning, Michael told me he had an important meeting and left the house earlier than usual. Something inside me refused to believe him. As soon as he drove away, I got into my car and followed him from a distance. My hands were shaking so badly that I could barely hold the steering wheel. I kept telling myself that I was only trying to protect my family, but deep inside, I was terrified of what I might discover. Michael didn't drive to his office. He stopped in front of a small jewelry store. I watched through the window as he walked inside. A few minutes later, he came out holding a small gift bag. My heart sank. I couldn't breathe. Tears filled my eyes as I whispered, "He bought another woman a gift." I drove home before he could see me. That evening, I couldn't even look at him. Every smile felt fake. Every kind word sounded like another lie. I wanted to ask him about the jewelry, but I was afraid of hearing the answer. Instead, I remained silent while my heart slowly broke. 2 days later, Michael called me while I was preparing dinner. His voice sounded different. "Sophia," he said quietly, "can you come to the hospital?" The knife slipped from my hand. Without asking another question, I grabbed my keys and drove as fast as I could. When I arrived, I found Michael sitting alone in the waiting room. His eyes were red from crying. He looked up at me and whispered, "There's something I've been hiding from you, and it's time you knew the truth." I stood there in the hospital staring at Michael. My heart was beating so fast that I could barely hear anything around me. There were people walking through the hallways, nurses calling patients, and doctors rushing from one room to another, but none of it mattered. All I could see was my husband sitting alone with tears in his eyes. It was the first time I had ever seen him look so broken. I slowly sat beside him and took a deep breath. "Michael," I whispered, "what's going on?" He looked down at the floor for a long moment before speaking. "Sophia, I should have told you the truth a long time ago." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick envelope. Inside were hospital bills, medical reports, and bank statements. My hands began to shake as I looked through the papers. I didn't understand what I was reading. Then Michael quietly said something that made my world stop. "Your father has been receiving treatment here for almost 2 years." I looked at him in complete shock. "My father?" I asked. "But he told me he was fine." Michael nodded slowly. "He wanted to protect you. When the doctors found his illness, he begged me not to tell you. He knew you were already stressed taking care of Lily and the house. He didn't want you to worry." Tears filled my eyes. "But the money," I whispered. Michael smiled sadly. "The money from my new job wasn't enough. That's why I worked late every night. I took a second job after work to pay for his treatment. Every extra hour, every missed dinner, every weekend I spent away from home, it was all so your father could continue receiving the care he needed." I couldn't speak. Every accusation I had ever made echoed inside my mind. I remembered every argument, every tear, every moment I had believed he was betraying me. Then I remembered the jewelry store. "The gift," I said quietly. "Who was it for?" Michael reached into his pocket and placed a small velvet box in my hands. "Open it." Inside was the most beautiful necklace I had ever seen. Attached to it was a tiny note. "Happy 15th anniversary, Sophia. Thank you for choosing me every single day." At that moment, I completely broke down. I covered my face and cried harder than I ever had before. I whispered through my tears, "I thought you didn't love me anymore." Michael gently held my hands. "I never stopped loving you, Sophia. I was only trying to carry everything by myself." For the first time in months, we held each other without saying another word. When we finally left the hospital that evening, I looked at Michael differently. I no longer saw the distant husband who came home late every night. I saw a man who had quietly sacrificed his time, his energy, and even his happiness to protect the people he loved. That night, I realized something I will never forget. The biggest mistake I ever made was believing my fears instead of trusting the man who had never stopped loving me. People often say that I married the wrong man. The truth is, I married the right man. I just understood his love far too late. Thank you for listening to this story. If it touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe for more emotional English stories.